Thank you, Lynn, and good morning, everybody, or early afternoon. Welcome to this workshop on AI as an assistant. Uh, this presentation is being given by myself, Maureen Larsen, Academic Technology Director at SUNY Orange, and Brian Cepuran, Vice President of D2L Labs at D2L Corporation. So this workshop is part of the FACT2 series on AI. The first workshop was getting started with AI, the second, potential pitfalls of AI in the classroom. The third was developing syllabus statements for AI use. The fourth, you're here, AI as an assistant. And the workshops will conclude next week with AI tools to help you build your course. So why is a focus on AI important? We have several different perspectives to look at this from. From an academic perspective, AI use is an important skill for our students to have in their future. And we have to begin today to help them start learning to use this tool. Most of the focus has been in AI discussions, at least on our campus. The focus has been on how do we prevent students from using AI? How can I catch them using AI? We can't have this. What's the policy? And I get the sort of apprehension around it. However, AI is a tool, and the students will be encountering this in their lifetimes going forward. So we need to sort of grab the bull by the horns and learn to use it ourselves, learn to guide our students in the appropriate use of it. Ethan Mollick is an associate professor at the Wharton School of Business in Pennsylvania, and he is a strong proponent of AI. He's got a lot of great information on AI with a faculty focus on how you can learn to use it yourself and help your students use it. We've got links to his blogs at the end of the presentation. But one of the quotes that he had said is, large language models are some of the most powerful software applications ever created, and no one really knows how to use them best. There's not really best practices. We're starting to come up with some, but there's really no handbook on it, precious little in the way of documentation. So you need to use them to figure it out. And the more you use it, the better you will get with it. So we're going to focus on showing students how to use AI tools to reinforce their understanding of course materials, concepts, and using AI responsibly and ethically in their academic work.
From a job market perspective, we looked at sort of, again, why is AI important? And the fact of the matter is that, the world is changing. Many roles today are changing to not just, potentially use AI, but really requiring the use of AI to be successful. On this slide here, we have an infographic from Statista based on some data from Accenture. And they were looking at the share of working hours across various industries that have a potential for automation or augmentation. So potentially, replacing tasks or just kind of changing how people complete those tasks with AI. And if we look at the proportion of time that they've kind of highlighted as being a high potential for automation, which is the green portion of each of those bars, as well as the high portion for augmentation, which is sort of that yellow portion of the bars, you see that across many industries, there is a tremendous amount of the working day that will be affected by AI. If we look at, banking and insurance, more than 3/5 of the day, is potentially impacted by AI. And it decreases from there, but you still see that across many industries, there is a tremendous impact. And really what this means is that students need to be prepared to live and work in a world that has AI as part of their day-to-day interactions, as well as their day-to-day lives. This sort of information can be very helpful to share with your students in case they're, if they're not aware or they're not really thinking of things through that lens, to help prepare them as they graduate and they go into the workforce. We also looked at it, just from a technology perspective. So one of the facts is that right now, there are a number of options out there that are really easy to use. and they have shown themselves to be helpful with many tasks. So if we look at some of the options, they include things like Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, Anthropic Claude, OpenAI ChatGPT, obviously is a very well-known one, and others are springing up all the time. Another, I guess, realization is that the cat is out of the bag with regards to AI. Something that's happened in the last year or so is, there have been multiple models that have become available as open source. So two examples of that are the Llama 2, which is a text-based large language model, and Stable Diffusion, which is more of an image-based one. And so because they've been released as open source, it means that there are people everywhere doing new and interesting things with them. It also means that it is it is difficult and potentially impossible to try to contain their use. If things are left to just a couple of big players, you could potentially, maybe you have regulations, you have rules, like you could potentially control it. But the fact that they're now out there and people are kind of using them on their own, it kind of eliminates that as an option. I mean, for one example that I remember reading about is that, someone got a large language model working on a Raspberry Pi, like a tiny little device that's very, very inexpensive. Like it didn't work well, but that was also just sort of like that particular version. So we see that, there's a tremendous opportunity that these things will be incorporated, in many, many places that we might not think of. Which leads sort of to the next point, where AI is becoming ubiquitous. It's becoming difficult or impossible to avoid. It's in the products that we buy and we use, right? They're in our mobile phones, in our smart appliances, they're in our cars. There's a whole new line of wearables coming out that are sort of AI powered or AI enabled. It's in the software we use, every day. Microsoft has made a point of, incorporating AI across their product suites. Adobe's doing a similar thing. It's also being incorporated into browsers. Like for anyone that uses Microsoft Edge, my Copilot is right there, front and center. Oh, I guess front end to the right slightly. But and it's also being incorporated into games to make for more realistic interactions within the game. It's also being incorporated into the services that we use. Customer service bots are becoming, quite common. You have various assistants that are all AI powered. So I think these are all, things that we need to be aware of and make sure that, students are prepared as they move forward. On the next slide, we kind of give a bit of an overview of the generative AI sort of landscape. On the left, you see there's an infographic from Sequoia Capital, and what they've done is that they're trying to convey that there are many different types of AI, and they've broken it down into sort of high-level categories based on sort of how they do things, and then they kind of subdivide that to let there are lots of people doing interesting things in specific applications of them. So one of the big ones is text-based AI, and then there's specific applications within marketing, within sales, within support, or just like writing in general. There's been advances in video and animation, allowing for a higher degree of personalization and potentially more automation. For those that were keeping up on the Hollywood strike of late, AI was a big factor in terms of the negotiations that went on. There are image-based AI applications, could use for marketing and design. There's ones that will generate code for you, both from generating it, documenting it, as well as offering options for people to be able to build things without having to actually write code themselves. There's also categories, in speech, around voice synthesis, as well as other aspects. On the right is a different view of sort of that same data, where it's being focused on this is focused on really on the creation of content, and they've broken it down into sort of the four main areas that they see that in terms of text, audio, video, and graphics. And the number of companies that are playing in this space is increasing day by day. They are doing more interesting and more difficult things all the time as their experience with these generative AI systems increases. The focus for today's presentation is really on the prompt to text systems. So this is, the chat GPT style systems. And these are the ones that will respond to a prompt, which is how you interact with these generative AI systems, as this, a text instruction, and it will respond with text as well. In terms of how they work, for those that aren't aware, GPT is an acronym. So that part of ChatGPT is an acronym for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And really all that is, it's a specific type of a large language model that has been trained on vast amounts of text data, like, just an unbelievable amount. And as a result, it is able to predict text piece by piece. And I think that's an important thing to understand about how these systems work. Because, we use a lot of terminology about them that makes them seem more human. But the reality is, it's just a model that can, take text as an input and then be able to produce an output that aligns with what it's been trained on. For example, in response to a prompt of, the capital of the state of New York is, it might respond with Albany, because those 3 bits of text are closely associated with the ideas that are captured in that prompt. The capital, the state, New York. It doesn't know that Albany is the capital of the state of New York, but what it was trained on had those ideas very closely related, and so it's able to respond in that way. Now, it's important to note that these systems are not perfect, and they will respond with erroneous information. In terms of how these things are referenced in the space of large language models, it's called a hallucination. And it's one of the reasons why you have to be diligent about how you're using these systems and verifying the output, and not just trusting it blindly. And if you ask the systems to make sure that it's correct, or if you ask them if it's correct, they will often respond, yeah, absolutely, it is correct. And not realize that it actually is not. And so it's left to us as the humans interacting with it to make sure that what we're doing what we're getting aligns with what we want to do. Also, just wanted to share, give people the wider perspective of AI, and the overall AI landscape, because AI has been something people have been actively working on for decades, and there's been lots of different aspects of AI that have been explored over time. You will find that there are learnings from one particular field will translate it over into others, but they're all sort of serving unique purposes, and they're all accomplished in slightly different ways. And just wanted to highlight that what we're talking about today is generative AI, which is really just one of those many aspects of the AI landscape. On the next slide, we have the question of which prompt to text tool is best. And that's not an easy question to answer. There are a number of different factors that need to be considered for every individual use case. So an important one, of course, is cost. There are a number of free options. There are freemium options, where you can use it for free to some degree, but there are limitations. And only if you pay for a license or whatever, are you able to access those more advanced capabilities, availability. There can be various limitations on on where you want to access it and where it's available. Those may not line up, and that can impact your potential choice for what it is that you want to use. Various systems are better at doing certain tasks than others. So when you think of ChatGPT, it's generally seen as being capable at multiple different areas. But researchers have also shown that they're able to tailor experiences or tailor results better to specific cases if they put the extra effort in. Your own experience with these tools is another factor. as Maureen said, the more that you use them and the more that the more experience you get with them, you get better at interacting with individual models. A lot of that will translate between models, but not necessarily directly, or at least not potentially without needing to tweak it some to get sort of those same results. So your experience with a particular model can really be the difference between the right one and the wrong one for you. Certain models are better at various subject matter areas. So this could be at professional writing. It could be at maybe it's around science or math. And it's all based on what they were trained on, what the model was trained on, as in terms of how it can respond to your requests in a particular area. Some of the tools will also give you some control over the level of quote unquote creativity. So this isn't Microsoft Copilot, which we have pictured here, is an example of one that provides some flexibility there. So you can have it be more creative, more balanced, or more precise. And really, it's not being creative. What it's doing is allowing you to deviate from the most likely results. And that can result in ideas or approaches that are different than what that you may be used to, and that are novel and unique. And that may spark something, a new direction for a particular a task that you're trying to accomplish. At this point, I think we want to put a question out to the audience. If you could respond in the chat. So I think we need to click there, Maureen. Yes, my lovely animations. So if you could please respond in the chat with, what are some of the AI tools that you have worked with? Would love to see your thoughts there.
And if you've never worked with any tool at all, please also put that in there. We'd like to see that.
Mm-hmm. Magic School. I'm not familiar with that one. Seeing a lot of ChatGPT, which is not surprising. Some Perplexity, some Claude, Microsoft Copilot.
There's one Pi that I saw so far.
There's a Perplexity.
Yep.
DALL-E, Mind Journey.
I believe as of yesterday, ChatGPT decided to allow you to use it without creating an account now. So that's something new. Some of them require accounts, some of them don't.
And I learned yesterday that the proper way to pronounce the large language model from Anthropic, its name is Claude. I had thought it was going to be Claude. My first step was to ask it how it pronounces its name. Or I asked it what its name is. Like, well, I call it Claude. And then I was like, okay, can you give me a phonetic spelling of that? And it did. And so then I was able to verify. And then so to make sure that it was not incorrect or hallucinating, I went and I found a video from the co-founder as he talked about, and the CEO as he talked about it, and he called it Claude. So I feel
okay.
That's a good verification.
Great. So now we know. All righty. So taking a look at how we can use AI and all these tools, right? How can this help our students, all this plethora of tools? We know that faculty do not want students to use this to create assignments, right? So if you tell it, write me a research paper, it will. But that's not a helpful thing for students or for faculty, right? But some of the ways that we can encourage students to use these tools are for language translation. So if they're taking a language class and they're getting stuck or not sure how to translate something, if they come across documentation that's in another language, you can ask AI to translate that for you. It does very well. You can give AI a word and say, give me this same word in 4 or 5 different languages, and it will do so. So that's helpful. It can summarize text or topics. If you use ChatGPT 4 or Perplexity, they have access to the web. They can look up something on the web and then give you a summary of things. You can upload a document, a paper, and say, summarize the key points here for me. So this can help your students sort of get on the right track if they're trying to understand, some documentation or books or whatever it is, and they might not understand it. You can use AI to explain concepts, theories, or definitions, right? So what are 3 other definitions for this word? Or you could give it a definition. What's the word that means this or that? Or what's the item that will do this? And it will give you suggestions for that. You can have your students, and I tell my students to do this all the time. If you're sitting there struggling with your homework and it's midnight and you just don't quite understand the steps to do something or how this thing actually works, just ask AI. It will explain it to you. And then you can say, make that clearer. I'm still not understanding. Can you clarify this point? And you can continue to prompt it, and it can really provide some good explanations for students, right? Trust but verify, like that. It's a cure for blank page syndrome. So I've told my students, suppose you have to write a research paper or an essay on global warming, and you can't really think of where to start, right? If you try to just research global warming or do a Google search on it, it's just way, way too much information. So give me 3 points on global warming that are seldom argued. Give me 3 points that are, irrefutable, right? And it can give you ideas for writing. And a lot of times the students may not even use those ideas. Sometimes it's what you need to sort of unstick the gears and get them thinking about some other things, right? So you can have it converse with AI and sort of banter back and forth on generating ideas. You can have it convert text to speech. So some of these AI models will read to you. So Pi is one that has the ability to text to voice, so it can read something out loud to you. You could upload a document and say, read this back to me, and it will do so. And you could choose the voice to do that. So I have several interns that are computer science students, and they were not familiar with AI at all. And over the last sort of 6 weeks, I've had them experiment with it and see the different AI tools, what ones they liked, how they liked using it. And one of my students who is taking Chinese was pleased to find out that Pi could read to him in Chinese, and he didn't want to have to read the text. So he'd upload it and it could read back to him and question him back and forth so he could practice his Chinese pronunciations. And it's good for stress reduction guidance. So your students could use it to sort of have AI take them through progressive muscle relaxation exercises, reducing stress around test anxiety. They can use this as a guide for those types of things. It's fun to use it to debate opposing points. So your student may have a perspective that they're trying to write about, and you could tell AI, argue against me for this point, right? Tell me, I'm going to state this, and you're going to state opposing views, and then I'm going to state things back, and they can sort of go back and forth and sort of test some of the statements that they want to make for a debate. Creating draft versions of anything, draft versions of a report, draft versions of email, draft versions of an outline, draft versions of a script. They can upload a paper that they've done and ask for feedback, right? So here are the objectives of this. Am I hitting the main points? Or take a look at this, read through this, and tell me what are the main points that are coming across, so students can see, are they on the right track? If your students write code, if they're in a coding class, you can submit code and say, is this clear? Is this, break this down, tell me what each part does. There's different ways that they can use it for coding. And like Brian said, some models are better for some things than others. There are specific models really geared towards writing code. Amazon has one with a free course attached to it as well. It can be a tutor 24/7 in all these ways, right? And I tell my students, if you can't reach somebody, you just have a question, use AI. Just ask the question and see what you get. And I'm encouraging my students to do this. I will say that I have several, maybe a third of my students who are terrified of AI and terrified of trying to use it. They don't understand. And I think it's important, the way Brian was explaining, how it just predicts what the next most probable letters should be to put together a word to show the result. And when I go through an explanation with my students and let them know this is how it works, they get less fearful of it, really. It's just a giant lookup thing that's going to predict what is probably the result that you need. So students have to double check. We need to show our students how to check for accuracy of the information. And we want to be careful about it. But I also tell my students, if you use AI, I want to know what prompt you used and then the result, and then bring that in and we'll talk about that. Was that a good result? Was it not? Did this work out well for this particular thing, right? So encourage them to share back with you how they're using AI, because then that helps us to guide them in the proper ways to use it. Okay. So when we're talking about using any of these tools and all the different ways that we can use them, the better prompt that you write, the better question you ask AI, the better results you're going to get. And a good prompt can be quite complex. Most of the time, if we're getting used to asking questions, right, we just sort of write what we think is a clear question. But the more details, the more context, instructions that you provide, the more information that you will get back that's appropriate to the questions that you're asking, right? So we're going to move on to the evolution of a prompt.
So it's the way that a lot of people start as they, once they start interacting with a large language model, is, they'll ask simple questions and kind of are looking for, answers to those simple questions. So here I have an example, and how should I prepare for a marathon? Clear question, should be theoretically easy to answer, but it's also not. It's going to give you a very generic response. I mean, if you do a Google search for the same thing, you'll find many sites that'll take you through the steps. And really, what the language model will do is regurgitate a variation of what's available on all those sites. Now, what you can also do is provide it with more context, right? And so we kind of evolve this from just sort of that initial simple prompt, and let's see if we can make a bit of a better prompt. And here we am. I am a beginner runner in my 40s. I am relatively fit, but have limited experience with longer distance runs. Please provide a plan that is tailored to my situation that would give me the best chance of success of completing my first marathon in 6 months while minimizing risk of injury. So what I'm trying to do here is give it more information about my specific use case to help it tailor its response to it. And what you'll notice is that as you provide additional information to those prompts, you'll get more targeted answers, more responses that are better suited for what you're trying to accomplish. And if we look at the different parts of a prompt, there are a number of different aspects that can be added to a prompt to make it better. So one example is providing context and providing examples. On the topic of examples, there's a terminology that they use in prompting, and they call it, you'll have like a 0-shot prompt, a 1-shot prompt, or a few-shot prompt. And what that means is, in the first case, no examples are given. So that, in those questions, in the simple prompt, I just said, how can I train for a marathon? You're not providing any additional context, no examples of what you're looking for. Whereas if you provide one example or one shot or a few, it can help the model understand what you're really trying to get. So examples might be, if you're asking for it to generate questions based on some content, if you provided a format for some sample questions, it will look at that and use that in its response to you, which can be helpful for getting it to give you the information that you're really looking for. If you can be specific, you really want to be specific and you want to be clear. I found an interesting quote from the Anthropic Claude prompt guide. Right? And they suggested that you show your prompt to a colleague and ask them if they can follow the instructions themselves and produce the exact result that you're looking for. Because if a human being can't, the language model's not going to be able to. It might get close. It might kind of give you something useful. It might give you something interesting that you weren't expecting. But if you're really looking for it to respond and provide what you're asking for, you need to be clear and need to be specific. You want to make sure you use appropriate grammar. As we mentioned before, these language models are trained on large amounts of text. And if you use, professional language, it is much more likely to respond to you in professional language. If you use a lot of slang or contractions and less formal language, it'll respond in kind. Because as it's navigating through its model, it's choosing the path that's aligned with the grammar that you're using. Um, Interestingly enough, researchers have shown that it can be helpful to be supportive. And that can mean literally adding in a sentence like, take a deep breath and think through, think through things step by step before continuing. There hasn't been really evidence as to why that works, but researchers have shown that there was a marked improvement between prompts that had that and prompts that didn't. It can be very helpful to define the role and the goal that you want the large language model to play. So that, is it a tutor? Is it an instructional designer? Is it a content reviewer? Is it a movie reviewer? And these things will get factored into how it responds to your prompt. It's important that if you have specific rules that you need to follow, that you define those rules and include that in your prompt. So, D2L has done a bunch of work, and we have a few betas in the market where we're working with large language models. And because we're doing it programmatically, we needed to follow certain rules especially on its output, so we can process it effectively. And so we have to define those rules as part of the prompt. It's also helpful to provide constraints. It can be, as you explore the realm of prompt engineering, which is what they call sort of this field of working on, on getting prompts to achieve what you're trying to achieve. Sometimes you need to tell it, here are things that you do not want it to do. And that can help streamline its response to what you're looking for. You can add personalization, and in terms of, giving it guidance on how you want it to respond. There are advanced techniques that you can use. Chain of thought is one where you get the large language, you include in your prompt to have the large language model think about what it's trying to do, and then kind of based on that information go on to and kind of take the necessary actions. There's also retrieval augmented generation. This is similar to sort of like providing specific context, and you can say, give me an answer to my question based on this specific text and only this text. So if you wanted to ask questions of an article that you found or of a research paper, you can limit it to just what's in the research paper, as opposed to allowing it to go into its larger model. You can adjust the creativity of, as I mentioned before, allowing it to pick less used paths. And that can, again, that you can tailor that to the response you're trying to get. And then there are some strategies that you can use to limit hallucinations. There's things like you can ask it to, if it has a low confidence or it doesn't know the answer, to respond with, I don't know. Or you can use a subsequent prompt to do a verification on what's come out of the prompt. These are things that can help. Like, it's not foolproof, but by taking a number of, you can apply multiple strategies to reduce the likelihood of hallucinations. Maureen, you're on mute.
Sorry. So this is an example, although very text heavy, of what is considered really a good prompt. So you see, it's very fully developed. And I'm going to go through the different parts of this, but just like Brian was explaining, we kind of color coded it at the bottom, so you could see how this prompt is broken down into the different parts. We've defined role and goal, step by step, constraints, personalization, and then the pedagogy. So the prompt says, right, we're telling AI, you're an upbeat, encouraging tutor, so that's the role, who helps students understand concepts by explaining ideas and asking students questions. That's the goal. That's what we wanted to do. So now we go to the step by step. Start by introducing yourself to the student as their AI tutor, who is happy to help them with questions. Then here's a constraint. Only ask one question at a time. When you don't use constraints, sometimes AI will kind of run on and do too many things at once. So you sort of give it those parameters. Then we get to personalization. First, ask them what they would like to learn about, and then back to step by step. Wait for a response. Then ask them about their learning level. Are you a high school student, a college student, a professional? Again, wait for their response. And then ask them what they already know about the topic they've chosen and wait for a response. So that's the setup for AI. And then we tell it, right? Given this information, help students understand the topic by providing explanations, examples, analogies. They should be tailored to the student's learning level and prior knowledge or what they already know about the topic. Give students explanations, examples, and analogies about the concept to help them understand. You should guide students in an open-ended way. Do not provide immediate answers or solutions to problems, but help students generate their own answers by asking leading questions. Ask students to explain their thinking. If the student is struggling or gets the answer wrong, ask them to do part of the task or remind the student of their goal and give them a hint. If students improve, then praise them and show excitement. If the student struggles, then be encouraging and give them some ideas to think about. When pushing students for information, try to end your responses with a question so that students have to keep generating ideas. Once a student shows an appropriate level of understanding, given their learning level, ask them to explain the concept in their own words. This is the best way to show you know something, or ask them for some examples. And we conclude with, when a student demonstrates they know the concept, you can move the conversation to a close and tell them you're here to help them if they have further questions. So what I did with my students is I had them start playing around with different AI tools, just whatever they thought, see how it works. And at first they were very unimpressed. They were trying with some chemistry examples. They were trying with some other classes, right? Because they are comp-sci students, and they said it was awful. So then after a week or two, I gave them this prompt and I said, now I want you to try using this whole prompt. So they typed the whole thing in and set this up. And they were very pleased on how much better it worked. However, it is still not good with math. And Megumi also wrote here, right? It's not good with chemistry. They found the same thing, right? So with a lot of the classes and mathematical formulas and that stuff, it's not good with it because, like Brian mentioned before, these models are trained on billions of pages of text. But to train a model for chemistry or mathematical functions or formulaic things, there's not that much out there, and they're not specifically trained for that, right? So we're looking at models that have just been trained with text. So that's why they're kind of limited in that way. But there are models existing that are being trained in probably those areas, but they're not free or open. They'll be, for pay products that you could probably use. But the students were very happy once they tried this kind of a prompt. So let me just go to the. So that's a whole lot of setup for getting an AI tool prepared, right? One of the things that you can do if you have ChatGPT and you do have an account, you can sort of prime the ChatGPT pump by setting up customized instructions. So if you sign in to ChatGPT and you look in the lower left, you're going to see that you have a little circle with your name. And if you click on that, you'll get this menu, Customize ChatGPT and Settings. If you click the Customize icon, you'll get these instructions and you'll see this screen. So the custom instructions, what would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide a better response? So this is where you would put in, right, I am, a community college instructor or a physics instructor or whatever it is, right? And I'm trying to get my students to understand whatever it is, right? The different concepts, set this up. And then how would you like ChatGPT to respond? That would be like the instructions that we gave it before, right? You want to give them questions. You want to not give them direct answers. You want to guide them through working through problems, etc. And you can populate both of these fields and save it. And then ChatGPT will respond in this way for the future conversations until you change it. So if you want your students to learn to use this tool to help them, you can create sort of boilerplate information that you can give them that they can set up in ChatGPT as well to use it. Let me see. So if you created several different templates, you can just save them in a Google Doc or a Word doc and copy and paste it in each time you need ChatGPT to act in a different way or have a different persona or a different goal. So you should develop these things, start playing around with this and test different prompts and see the results that you get based on the questions that your students may ask depending on what you're teaching. You know where your students get stuck and you know what could be helpful for them. So test some different prompts, and then you could create examples that you could provide then to your students. Explain to them how to use the tool, right? And you want to talk to them about those parts that we went through, right? The role and goal, step-by-step constraints, so that they understand how they can customize the tool in this way. You might want to create a starting prompt to give to your students and let them try that out, like I did with my interns using the Ethan Mollick prompt. And then have your students sort of work on this on their own. Let them create and share some prompts that they're doing, and then maybe have them do some group work or work as a class to create some like ideal prompts for different situations, and then share those. That's something that you can use as you go forward if you're going to let students use this as a tool. Okay. So I don't know, are you guys seeing the, please respond in the chat? Have you, I'm not sure if that's showing on the screen there. Whoops.
It is showing on the screen.
It is, okay, right. So we just want to know, right, based on all of this, are you thinking now maybe ways that you could use one of these tools like ChatGPT to help your students, like guide them, providing them the questions that they could ask, which would provide additional information? So just starting to introduce it. Yeah, I think once you start to play with it yourself a little bit more along these ways, it sort of opens up a whole plethora of things that you can do with it. A list of questions for an informational interview. That's great. So there are so many plugins. The world of AI grows every single day. It's incredible to try to keep pace with it. But there are a lot of plugins. You can get plugins for ChatGPT that it can create flowcharts and mind maps and all kinds of things. And some students have used that to help them. Yep, and if students, if they're reluctant to create an account, there is Pi.ai. ChatGPT now can be used without creating an account, which is really good. You can use Copilot and Bing, like Brian said. You don't have to sign in. You get better results if you sign in, and that will only generate images if you do sign in. But yep, you do want them to cite it, and both MLA and APA have ways for students to reference the use of AI, and it includes where they have to list their prompt. They have to give the prompt that they used and then what the AI results were. Yep, good point. If you sign in, it does keep your history, so you can refer back to it. Right. Okay, so we looked at how it could help your students, but how can AI help faculty? So you guys can use this as well for lots of things, right? So drafting lecture outlines, you can put your outline in there and then ask AI, right? How can I make this more engaging? How can I make this more collaborative? How can I ask, 10 additional questions about this, right? What are the key points that I'm making in this lecture, right? Maybe we're missing a few things. Maybe it could give us some new points to make. Quiz questions, it can draft all kinds of questions. I love the one for generating like ice-breaking ideas for a class or for an online class, or it's got some really amusing ideas. You can ask it for jokes. You can ask it to generate different things. Conversation starters, group work suggestions. It's really good at that. You want to be as specific as you can, like try to work on a prompt to do that. Otherwise, it's kind of bland sometimes, the results that you get. Preparing for difficult conversations, it does pretty good with that. It can sort of give you a script if you explain the situation, like I'm going to be meeting with a student and the student is not doing well. I've already spoken to them twice about this, and now things are getting to the critical point, right? So it can sort of bring up some points you might want to speak to your student about to sort of get them steered back in the right direction. And typical administrative stuff, drafting meeting agendas, right? Research assistance. It does very good in rubric creation, right? So then how have you used an AI tool to assist you in your faculty tasks? Oops, I want to go back to the other one. Sorry, guys. So is anybody using AI now for any of those things that we mentioned?
Discussion prompt suggestions.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that we haven't mentioned, any creative ways that you guys are using it? Yep, classroom activities is terrific. Oh, great, Carol. Oh, questions for Kahoot games. That's good. Separate course is an AI research course. So I'm not sure what category they would put that in, but I know that some schools are starting to create courses, semester-long courses in AI use. So Catherine, you haven't been happy with the ability to use it for multiple choice questions. Try working with some of the sample prompts, like that Ethan Mollick prompt, and we have links to his blog and the videos that he has. He's got a series of 5 videos on AI for faculty, and very informative, really good, and you might be able to build a better prompt to get some better results for multiple choice questions. Sure. Okay, so this is an example of a prompt here. Microsoft has now created sort of a prompt library for teachers and professionals. So this is just an example that I pulled off the Microsoft blog, and you can see it follows pretty much the same recipe, where we're just sort of setting the stage, giving it instructions step by step, personalization. So the recipe for effective prompting is really something that we do have. We can follow sort of a set process for creating a good prompt. So it's not that we're completely lost on that. And then from here, you can be creative on your own. And you could ask AI how you can make a better prompt, and some faculty do. So how can I make this prompt better? Put the prompt in, right? And what would make this better? Oh, okay, Megumi, yep. So you really need to work a lot with it, but it's definitely kind of a rabbit hole once you start working with it. My students found that as well. But it's like any other tool, we're going to have to get more and more used to how we're using it. But I really encourage you to try it and then speak with your peers and see what is everybody doing with it, because everybody's going to have their own take on it. There's a lot of people having better success with it. So that's what we kind of want to follow. So that's a good point. Now, I'm not sure, L. Lev, you need to check with your school and make sure that you are allowed to put any information into AI. So for instance, some AI recommendations say, you could upload your student roster and have it print out this and that. You need to make sure that you're allowed to do that. You can put student information in there or grades or whatever, and it can do all these things. There's a lot of videos and tools out there that are saying you just need to do all this, but you need to check and make sure that your school would allow that, number one. And number two, the models use what you enter in as a way to train. So you'd have to, yeah, go ahead, Brian.
And that can be dependent on how you interact with it as well. Like, so the rules governing how you use ChatGPT are different from how you use, like how you interact with it over, say, like a programmatic interface, like through APIs. So, like, with the work that D2L has done in Brightspace, in some of our initial work, we're working with OpenAI, but we're using the APIs. And when you do it in that way, they forget the information. Like they'll respond to the prompt, and then they'll get rid of all that information so that it doesn't go and train the model. An API, an application programmer interface. It's a way that two systems talk to each other. Sorry, maybe a little too much of a technical term. For my apologies.
Okay, so what can you do today with all of this information, right? If you're not using AI yet, please do so. Give it a try. Like I said before, if you don't want to create an account, you can try perplexity.ai. You can try pi.ai and just don't create an account. They all will encourage you to do so, but you don't have to. Use Copilot in Microsoft Edge, and now you can try ChatGPT as well without creating an account. Practice with some prompts. We're going to be sharing these slides, or you can go to the Ethan Mollick blog and copy that prompt that he has. There's that and a few others that you can use as a practice prompt. Take your favorite parts of everything and start building some boilerplates for yourself, and check for accuracy, right? So that you have a process for showing your students how to do the same. So AI resources best for math and science. I'm not sure, Carol. There's still, I think, a lot of work to be done in that area. I haven't specifically looked for any that really are best for math and science, but I do know that for math, for helping students with math, right? Khan Academy, which we're all familiar with, Khan Academy created Khanmigo, which is their AI, which works extremely well, right? So that will never give an answer. They do charge for it. I think it's $4 a month for a teacher, a family plan, or an individual, because these AI models are extremely expensive to run. But that will take the student through and explain everything, give example upon example. It will never give an answer to a problem, but if you give it a problem, it would explain how to do that problem, right? Different ways that you could do a problem like that. So the link for Ethan Mollick, yep, that's we have a bunch of links at the end, but if you just Googled Ethan Mollick, Wharton School, you'll get, he's got a YouTube channel, and really interesting. It's a great place to start. He also links out to a lot of other faculty that are doing faculty-focused AI work. And then Brian, if you want to talk a little bit about a growth mindset, which I thought that was great.
So yeah, I mean, one of the things that I believe, and I have two small children, and I talk about frequently, is the is just sort of the Dr. Carol Dweck's growth mindset. The idea that if you're not good at something, today, that's because you haven't practiced. And if you practice, if you put the effort in, you will get better. And so if you're feeling that you don't get this AI stuff, or that you're not comfortable with it, if you start, you'll get, and if you continue, you will get better.
All right, so we also do want to highlight that there is a FACT2 AI Symposium Day, Transforming the Educational Practices in a World with AI, at the University of Buffalo on May 21st. And there's a $30 fee just to cover the cost of lunch. But if you can't go to that, there's a free remote option. You should register. There's a link here. And I think Lynn Ann put a link earlier back to the CPD site to register. But we encourage you to do that.
So there are a couple of questions that have been asked in the Q&A, and the follow-up in the chat here that I want to take a minute to kind of talk about. So Todd, I think you have a couple of related questions. So your first one was, how many core AI applications are out there? And then, how many of them are just kind of based on those core? And so, Maureen, do you see the note?
Yeah, yep.
So it's not. I don't think of it as much as core AI applications, and think of it more as core models. So there are some models that are more predominant as the underlying and like the engine for some of the tools that are being built, right? So OpenAI has a lot of adoption, both directly so their GPT model, the models have adoption either directly through OpenAI or through their partnership with Microsoft Azure. With Google, they have their Gemini and other models available. AWS has made a number of different models available, including Anthropic Claude, which is another sort of leading model. And but the interesting thing is, with a lot of these, you can tailor them to a specific use case. So it's the terminology that's used to describe this is fine tuning. And the idea is you start from a base model and you can add a layer on top that kind of tunes it to your specific use case. And this is very common for those that are building off of the Llama 2 set of language models that Meta open sourced. Uh, with each of these models, they all have like the data that serves as an input is unique to each of them. The weights that get generated through the training process are unique to each of them, um, and they're different amongst them, right? And so if you have something that's built on top of one of the GPT models, it will tend to respond in similar ways. If it's built on top of Meta or others, they'll kind of respond in those ways. There was also talk about using them for quantitative operations. It's actually interesting. So when OpenAI made a big splash with ChatGPT, one of the things that people pointed out was that it was terrible at math. Right? If you gave it a simple question, like 1 + 1, it would answer 2. If you did, I think it was like 4-digit math, 4-digit addition, right? It would fail miserably. But what I've seen in the last few months is with OpenAI specifically, I think they've added in some pre-processing to look for some math and be able to answer it better. The trouble is that their default response when they first released was again just text completion. So the odds of it being able to answer a particular question would be dependent on whether or not that question was used to train it. So it doesn't know how to do math. It knows how to predict the next bit of text. Now, there are techniques, and Maureen mentioned Conmigo, where you can have it go through interim steps that can actually help it do some of these math, these more quantitative operations, like doing math and all that. But it does get more complex, and and you have to chain together a number of different prompts to ultimately make it work. Does that help? Does that answer the questions?
I think so.
Yes.
I think we've got most of these. Yep. All righty. So thank you, everyone. And here's attached to this presentation, you'll find a link to Ethan Mollick's blog. There's a ChatGPT's guide on prompt engineering within ChatGPT documentation. And if you have an account and you go to that on the side, you'll be able to connect to documentation through ChatGPT. Effective prompts for AI, the essentials, Microsoft's prompt. I've got a link to that so you can see that too. And then AI prompts for teaching, a spell book. That one's kind of interesting. It's just a site where faculty are encouraging all faculty to share their best prompts and links to things. So yes, yep, we'll be sending the presentation to Lynn, and I believe it's going to be posted with wherever they put the videos as well. Yes, so all of the videos and presentations are going to be, is it on the CPD website, Lynn? There's a place for that, right? Or is it a FACT2 website?
It is actually in 2 places.
Okay.
It will be on the CPD YouTube channel. It will also be on the FACT2 AI website under the playlist. And there will be links for both.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, I believe the links on this presentation will be live. I'll be sending it over just as a PowerPoint and they should work. But if not, just, email me, let me know. I'll give you my email and you could just email, we'll give you the links. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you all for attending. I hope you found this informative, and don't forget to attend next week as we wrap up with the series, and have a great weekend.
Take care.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody.